But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. How's everybody doing this evening as we look to see what bullshit we have in store for you today? There's so much. There is a true surfeit of bullshit in our days, and we're going to look at a small sampling of it. We started yesterday to watch a wonderful, heartwarming Darman joint called "Employee Nearly Kills Mean Boss." What happens is shocking. Where the main thing that happens is we find out that Darman doesn't know what bakery kitchens look like, and also what how cupcakes work. So far, that's the main thing. Hey, bonsoir. And let's see, we've got a 9-hour mega stream from Caleb Muppet called Lots of Debating Ellipsis. We've got Destiny's talking about his cursed media company and who he wants to recruit. The media company is called Omniliberal Media, which sounds like fucking self-satire. Then we've got another Caleb Muppet, peace with North Korea, a subject that he has demonstrated he actually knows less about than fucking than he knows about Marxism. Those who believe that Kamala Harris will lower their living costs and grocery bills are some of the most gaslit people on earth. Yeah, I mean, all that is demonstrating is that these are the things she feels compelled to say in order to sound like she's from the same planet as the rest of us. I mean, that's not... The only way that's going to happen is if she is not only elected, but absolutely fucking terrified of what would happen if she doesn't. And meanwhile, she outright rejects an end to the genocide. I mean, she claims she's for a ceasefire, but the only way that's going to happen is if the U.S. cuts off the weapon supply to Israel, and she's against that. I mean, actually, at this point, no less a disgusting piece of shit than Israeli War Minister Yoav Gallant actually just the other day said, the only obstacle to this thing ending is Israel. I mean, which just is only... the only critique there is to make of that statement is that the U.S. is also an obstacle to the thing ending. But yeah, so we've got Freddy the Boar on Peak Woke, where he teams up with sex pest Yasha Monk, who's also a reactionary piece of shit. We've got some Pim Tool bullshit. Caleb on Jesus, Guns, and Babies with Dr. Candace Taylor, who I've never heard of. So, how shall we start? What else have we got here? Olympics mockery of Christianity is about more than hurt feelings. They're not terrified enough. They're mildly nervous is the best you can say at the moment. You can tell they're terrified because they start actually doing shit rather than talking about doing shit. Hey Riveroon, how you doing? We've also got Weed Lord talking about the Olympics, JD Vance is weird, and Beast is cooked. And we can finish, or we could also start out by finishing up that Darman bakery bullshit that we were starting to look at. Employee nearly kills me, boss! What happens is shocking. So, any particular preferences in there, chat? And how's everybody doing? Well, maybe that's what some of the debating is about, actually. I haven't watched any of this. It's a 9-hour video that is nothing. Apparently, it's called Lots of Debating. Fuck knows who he's debating with. But it's 9 hours of it. Like, one... Oh, yeah, that... Me too. Hope you are doing better. That's right. There was that whole thing you were telling us about last week. I mean, who knows what he's debating, and honestly, it's like 1 minute with Caleb Muppet already feels like 9 hours, so like 9 hours of Caleb Muppet could be a bit wild, painful, some deep hurting. So, what's everybody think? What's everybody's pleasure? Yes, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, obviously we're not going to get through the full 9 hours, especially at the rate I talk. But there might be some good bullshit in there. Hell, why not? Lots of debating. Here we go. Yes, I have some Caleb. And I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to have at least a look at lots of debating. Right. Well, actually, my inclination is to slow it down. Give him drunk voice.
All right, everything's working. Thank you very much, everybody. Welcome back to the Combo Couch. I am Pasta Jardula. Unfortunately, Fiorella...
Couch. That is vaguely familiar to me. Hey, Erica Whelan. How you doing? Convo Couch, that's some sort of right-wing bullshit, isn't it? I feel like I've heard of this in passing, but it's not ringing a bell.
Got stuck at the office again today. As you know, she has just returned from the Donbass, doing some great reporting, taking a look and seeing what's going on over there. She wanted to go there since she got on the ground in Moscow, and she was able to get that chance to go do so. Life-changing. She says she's going to be posting a lot of stuff, talking about a lot of stuff, what she experienced over there. But unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. And I really wanted her to be here, but it's okay. Since this is my idea, I'm going through with this. As you know, I've been talking about the Libertarian Party. I've been talking about possibly what I've been calling the great compromise of sorts, and that's anti-imperialist left who really are down with, not being interventionist. This
is Craig Pasta Yardula. Or Yo pasta. He's Convo Couch. Apparently Caleb Muppet is going to be on here talking with fucking libertarians. Oh, here we scroll. Let's skip over a little bit. Okay, here we go.
I know
Here's
I
the
had
birthday
Scott
boy.
Horton on the show yesterday, and when he had a chance to go after Mao and Stalin, he did. But sometimes history is not what we know of it; it's what's written, what we're told.
It's definitely
what we're
not what you know of it. I think we can be fairly certain of that.
programmed. And there's a lot of questions out there. But Caleb, why don't you give us a little opening about what type of communist you are and how that relates to what you're trying to achieve today?
Well, the first thing I want to make clear is that if I thought that the woke
Is his voice like higher than usual here?
left were a representative of communism, if I thought that these people running around, burning buildings and advocating censorship on the internet, who want to allow Silicon Valley to silence free speech, who support the lockdowns, who are cheering for World War III against...
Motherfucker, this guy likes to... Wait, I mean, he did a whole thing about, he's so fucking... Now he's apparently... First of all, talking about supporting... This is recent, okay? Like, what lockdowns is he talking about? Nobody's taking any fucking COVID precautions in the U.S. anymore. Like, China, which he claims to be a big supporter of, is still actually taking at least some. Cuba is still taking some, actually, and they've done a pretty bloody good job with it. Like, literally, this is just a talking point that he's using in order to signal to the far right that he's mates with them.
Against Russia. If I thought those people were communists, I'd hate communism too.
If I thought that Caleb Maupin was a communist, I'd also hate communism.
I absolutely would. And, what I call the synthetic left, these entities that are a result of CIA programs like MKUltra and the Congress for Cultural Freedom, these folks that are funded by the wealthiest capitalists, George Soros and the Ford Foundation.
Well, yeah, I mean, you gotta love that Soros money that all the communists get to have.
And the Rockefeller think tanks, those folks are not representative of anything that I stand for. I'll tell you that much. And, the life-changing experience...
Nor is the rule of thirds representative of anything he stands for. Like, he's giving us an otorhinolaryngologist's view of his face.
That I've had is when I've gone to global communist gatherings. I went to the World Festival of Youth and Students in Quito, Ecuador in 2013. I went to the World Festival of Youth and Students in Sochi, Russia in 2017.
Like, okay, first of all, so he's traveled. Okay, neat. I mean, I've traveled. I don't have a problem with people traveling, but I mean, it doesn't make you some kind of fucking hero. You went to Sochi for the World Festival of Youth and Students. Like, what the fuck does that have to do with communism anymore? It is... The Russian government is sponsoring that shit. You're talking about, like, the richest fucking capitalists? What, you don't think that the fucking Russian capitalist oligarchs are...
Venezuela, I've been to Nicaragua, I've been to countries where there are big communist parties that are leading millions of people. And what's interesting is,
Venezuela is not a great example there because the government actually used some bullshit mechanism that exists to take off to remove the elected board, the elected Central Committee of the Venezuelan Communist Party, and put their own people in there, basically in order to get rid of left opposition. So, I mean, like, literally, every ML party in all of fucking Latin America is up in arms about this. There have been protests about, at the Venezuelan embassy by the communist parties that he's talking about here.
Dave, when he was starting out...
I know. Stalinist parties, or at the very least... they vary in Latin America in terms of just how much they valorize Stalin. but certainly ML parties, certainly parties that, you know, claim the Soviet legacy and shit. But even they would disagree with him on this. They're not actually very happy with Venezuela at the moment. Hey, Helsatine, been a while. Good to see you.
You know, I look like a capitalist and he looks like a communist. When I go to actual
Yeah, you look like a capitalist's night manager. We'll put it that way. I don't think that suit actually qualifies as looking like a capitalist, because look at it. Capitalists, you can usually get suits that fit. But yeah,
countries where there are big major communist parties, they wear suits and ties. They look like
he's doing his old shit. This is like, we watched him talk about his origin story about why he dresses like a middle school principal, and he explained that he literally explained this. You can go back. If you look up SEIU in my videos, you will find this. Because he explained that the reason he realized that this is how true revolutionaries dress is that he talked to an SEIU full-timer, and that convinced him.
Serious worker politicians, and they represent millions of people, and their focus is on economic development. It's about race.
Well, okay, and here we go with this, where he sort of pretends, or maybe knowing him and knowing his, like, really thick ignorance, it is entirely possible that he does not understand that the economic situation in Latin America and the economic situation in the imperial core are very different, specifically in terms of things like growth and development.
Raising people up out of poverty. 21st century socialism in the Bolivarian countries, socialism with Chinese characteristics, which has raised more people out of poverty than any other system in history.
He just keeps on saying this. Like, first of all, a lot of that, it's based on the UN's metric, and the UN's metric has problems. It's like, actually, but a lot of this was at the cost of all sorts of social services that they had. It was actually at the cost of mechanisms of worker participation that had existed previously. Like, it was actually, it's just welfare state capitalism with a big red flag.
It's about using state power and controlling the market to raise people up. It's about promoting technology and innovation. And the ultimate goal, if you read what Karl Marx wrote in his critique of the Goethe program, is for a society with so much wealth.
He doesn't, he actually pronounces it that way always, because he can't tell the difference between Goethe, the writer, and Gotha, a town in Germany.
Abundance. That the state can fade away. That there can be total equality. Social hierarchies can fade away. Labor becomes life's prime want, meaning people
Communism is when line go up.
Only work because they feel like it, to not be bored. It's not a necessity. Labor is no longer a necessity because technology has advanced so much. 21st century socialism, the movement that has raised millions of people.
Like, there he is again, because the same thing, I was just saying, to talk about, like, the economic situation that is being faced in Latin America versus in the imperial core, in terms of questions of, like, growth and development, is, as different, really, as the 19th century in the global north versus the present day. Like, talking about it like the only thing standing between us and communism is that we're not producing enough fucking widgets is an interesting choice.
Out of poverty that has, turned Russia and China into superpowers, that has built,
you're getting him wrong there. Because remember, he's not one of the woke Soros communists who burn down buildings. No, he's probably against woke shit like menstruation.
Some of the biggest telecommunications manufacturing corporations in the world, has the fastest trains in the world in China these days. This system of having an economy that is organized to serve public good and having a government of action that fights for working families.
God, he is trying to make that slogan happen. Look at the faces on these guys. Look at just how completely nonplussed they all are watching this shit. Like, why the fuck is this guy here?
And utilizes the market to strengthen an overall state-run economy. That's the vision that has been very successful in both the 20th century and the 21st century. Obviously, the Soviet Union had problems, and we've modernized, and things have changed.
What
but
do
around
you
the
mean
world,
modernized, motherfucker? What do you mean we've modernized? Like, what was your contribution to this modernization, Caleb?
woke left and all these, hipster kids that think they're Marxists. There is a global communist movement that runs many countries, Vietnam.
Yeah, and those motherfuckers mostly don't wear suits, actually. In fact, the ones who wear suits are not very well thought of a lot of the time.
China, Angola, many countries around the world, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela.
Yeah, Cuba you can't really use it as an example, as an alternative to the woke shit, though. Like, Cuba has been doing the woke shit quite systematically for a while now. They just recently, this year, had, like, their 10th annual... sorry... participation in the International Days Against Homophobia and Transphobia. They redefined what constitutes a family, removing the nuclear family as the sole model. You can say a lot of things, and I'm not, like, Cuba isn't communist, just to be clear. But you can't, like, try to create this dichotomy between the woke and countries that are run along sort of ML lines or like fucking Dungist lines in China when you've got Cuba there, because Cuba's woke as fuck. Yes, communism is when tractors.
They have had very positive results by utilizing a market sector to fit in with an overall state central vision for leading toward that ultimate goal of a stateless, classless world, building up and advancing technology.
Wow. I think this may be the very first time he has ever actually referred to a stateless, classless world. And if anything, these guys that we're looking at there, look at the guys on the right. Let me make sure you can see them. Oh, you can't see them. Oh, you're missing out. I gotta fix that. Because these guys' facial expressions are important. There we go. There, you can see them now. Look at these guys on the right there. In all senses of the word. Just look at those fucking facial expressions.
And I think a lot of libertarians, if they saw it this way, if they saw that we believe in technology, we believe in growth, and we believe in innovation, and
But that's not... So you're saying if libertarians, right libertarians, let's be clear, believed fundamentally in a completely different model of an economy, that they would get on with you? Is that what you're saying?
we see capitalism and the rule of the world by big banks and big corporations, what Lenin called imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage, the highest stage of capitalism. I think if a lot of libertarians saw that we believe in growth and we are opposed to these global big corporations and the governments that enforce their will with force.
That's what the libertarians like, though. Their whole idea is that that the people who own those things should have unchecked power. They have this really silly idea that if you took the state away, that would actually, and they would still be able to exist. I mean, a lot of right libertarians want to have the state at least as a way to prop up the power of capitalists, but you do have some on the fringes of it who want no state, but they want to have the power of capitalists, as if you could have the power of capitalists with no state, like with no cops. Like, why would anyone give a fuck about what capitalists?
I think they might have a different perspective.
Well, I'm going to just let one of the guys, Dave or Spike, jump in. I'm assuming when they heard the word state power or state control, that's when they got a little bit of because we know how they hate government.
Man, like, adjust your fucking camera.
I think that, libertarianism obviously has a lot
like
of
Spike Cohen, whoever the hell that is, on the right there. Yeah, it just looks absolutely like he's ready to fucking cold cock Caleb here. Although that might be because he knows Caleb is really fucking anti-Semitic. But then he's also hanging out with right
tendencies of
libertarians.
anarchism,
Probably okay.
where
with
we
that.
want no state, we want no overreaching power. Dave, why don't you jump in and give us your take on what type of libertarian you are and what you're all about, and why it might not be so great to go the communist route over here.
The communist route.
Yeah, well, I suppose then after listening to, I'm not very familiar with Caleb, but after listening to his open remarks, I suppose you could say all three of us are anarchists.
No, you fucking aren't. No, you absolutely are not. We cannot say that, Dave Smith.
Me and Spike are both anarcho-capitalists, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You're not anarchist. You have a meme ideology. You have an ideology that doesn't even make sense internally, because you think that capitalists can exist if there are no cops to ensure that capitalists can hoard all their shit and nobody can take it. Okay, it is a clash of garbage ideologies right here. And I have to say, we've had very mixed experiences with jabroni stacking on this stream here. That's what I've decided to call it. This is jabroni stacking. It's when you got jabronis coming out both ends are debating with each other. So we're going to see how well this works.
Even the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, private property rights, and
the non-aggression principle. Chad, have you heard of that bullshit? See, the idea is that supposedly, all that anarchism, well, what their bullshit version of anarchism is that you can't initiate violence. Except that their definition of violence is specifically designed so, like, for example, if workers go on strike, that's initiating violence. If, on the other hand, capitalists decide to make working conditions so shitty that workers feel the need to go on strike, that's not violence. That's not the whole thing. The whole non-aggression principle is based on the idea that the only violence is violence against authority.
It was also a communist anarchist in the sense that the ultimate end goal would be the withering away of the state for a stateless, classless society. I would certainly be skeptical that the path toward abolishing the state would be to grow the state to be tremendously powerful. That seems counterproductive to me, and I don't.
I mean, I will say that is not an entirely out there position. Like, Chomsky has actually argued that at times, the state, it is actually useful if the state it has more power again, if it is being used against capital for or something like that. And of course, how exactly you get to the point where the revolutionary situation exists, that is another question as well. I mean, that can often involve a state that is taking huge amounts of power as it's trying to preserve the power of its ruling class. I mean, an obvious example would be like Russia 1917. Well, I mean, Russia the entire early 20th century was...
I don't think you're ever going to end up getting to that point. I think I can speak for Spike as well, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not, because I know Spike very well, that both me and Spike have really no issue with socialism so long as it's voluntary. I mean,
like, what does voluntary mean? I mean, you don't require capitalism to be voluntary. Because if capitalism is voluntary, that means that we have to voluntarily decide, whether we recognize capitalists' claims to own everything that you need to survive as legitimate. And if we voluntarily decide no, that's not something we're willing to accept, then they're sort of finished. But apparently when socialism is
I
voluntary...
mean, we have no issue with worker co-ops or people buying up plots of land and sharing them around. No issue with, all pitching in for mutual aid or something like this to take care of healthcare or something like this. Private sector unions, collective bargaining in that sense.
Oh, notice that. So no workers in the public sector don't get to organize.
I have no problem with. I do have quite an issue when it's being forced on people. I don't agree with your assessment of history. I think that both, it's not as if there were like some problems with the Soviet Unions or some problem with Mao Zedong's China, but overall it helped the country and turned them into superpowers. I think these were two of the most horrific regimes that have ever existed. And I would say that...
Wait, but I mean, what's interesting is the thing he's contradicting there, or seems to be contradicting, is one thing that you can definitely say. Like, both of those systems did geopolitically turn the places, the countries where they existed, into much more powerful players than they had previously been. I mean, that is like one thing you can say. That isn't communism. Like, communism is not when geopolitically important. But that is true.
China has, while they're still, of course, the in-name Communist Party, that's the one-party dictatorship over there, they certainly have moved far away from the communism of Mao Zedong.
Fucking hell, he's getting schooled on communism by this jabroni. I mean, like, this is what I'm talking about with jabroni stacking. So now, fucking Caleb Muppet is getting schooled on communism by, what's this fucker's name? Dave Smith. Oh, it's right behind his head.
Announcing that wealth is now good, making it much easier for people to start businesses and make money. I think that is much...
Well, wait, wealth is now good. Nobody was talking about wealth being bad. It's when wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few ghouls. That's the objection. And yes, like China did decide, yes, actually we're kind of in favor of private concentrations of wealth and having a capitalist class and all this stuff. But of course,
much more accurately, what is their kind of what's helped improve the situation for millions of people over there in China, although there's obviously still a lot of problems. I do agree with the criticisms of the imperialist West. I think that if you...
But not to the extent of understanding why his system that he favors makes that stuff completely inevitable, of course.
Want to describe that as capitalism, because semantic debates are the most boring and least...
Yeah, well, yes, and also if you describe that as capitalism, you have to admit that your ideology yields a fucking nightmare regime.
Productive debates. I would just say that what me and Spike are advocating for is laissez-faire, non-interventionist free markets, and that's...
Yeah, so what you're talking about then is like the British Empire system. That was very voluntary, remember. Everybody just like lined up and said, yeah, why don't the Brits come here and take all our shit, please? Very voluntary, very non-aggression there.
Certainly the most powerful government in the history of the world, the United States of America, going all around the world, starting wars for profit is certainly not anything that we would be advocating for.
See, this is so silly. Okay, so you're against that, but you're for the thing that makes that inevitable, because as long as we have an economy that is organized around capitalist profiting, capitalists will encourage the state to go off and start wars if that seems to be useful in order to acquire markets and resources and stuff.
So I'll say this, that in the spirit of what we've talked about the last few times on the show, we are all opposed to the American warfare machine. That is despite what any other economic differences we make.
But why? It's a capitalist profit-making enterprise. I mean, surely what you got to do there, non-aggression principle after all. If somebody wants to use their stolen billions in order to make exquisitely horrible instruments of death and destruction and market them around the world, then it would be aggression for us to actually try to stop them doing that.
That's a pretty damn important agreement. I think about those missiles those Ukrainian missiles that hit Poland a few months back, but when Zelensky came out and blamed it on Russia, we had politicians here in America advocating, invoking.
That's very interesting. This is recent. Let me see. When was this done? I have to make sure. Yeah, 6 days ago. 6 fucking days ago. And the only example you're gonna think about of horrible things happening involving U.S. missiles is when some of them hit Poland. Not say completely wiping out like the entire life-sustaining infrastructure of Gaza and probably about 9% of the population there. No, a couple of errant missiles that hit fucking Poland.
Article 5. Just the other day, there was in the German parliament, one of their politicians announced that Germany was at war with Russia, which always works out really well in Germany.
Yeah, okay. I have to say, I have to hand it to him. Yeah, that is true. Germany has done so well when they've gone to war with Russia. That's true.
And Russia go to war. This is it's kind of the stakes are very high, and I do look at this kind of like if you were like an abolitionist during slavery. And you were,
but wait a second. But then again, what about the non-aggression principle, Dave Smith? What about the non-aggression principle? Because they're just, is it when you actually impinge upon the power of the people who own everything and everyone? That's aggression, according to your ideology. So how can you be against chattel slavery and for the non-aggression principle?
We're like but we disagree on tax policy or something like that. It'd still be a pretty important issue that you were both on the same side of. So I do kind of feel that. But I don't know. I guess I could stop there. Let Spike go.
Well, let Spike jump in, because this question I have for Spike is what Dave just said. The one thing talking about like. He disagrees with the assessment of Mao and Stalin, what I'm saying? But this is something that I often want to have discussions with libertarians about too as well, is that they'll agree that the interventionism, causes a reaction from these countries to, act a certain way or go to
interventionism, yes. But why is there intervention? Why is there the interventionism?
Methods. And I'm not saying that they were the Boy Scouts by any means, but I've been down to Nicaragua and I've seen collectivism and I've seen the number one issue be national sovereignty and the way a country has to bond together. I mean, we talked about this briefly the day before the live show. It's about Cuba, like, Castro, like he didn't come out there and like communism, it's what's for dinner. He didn't sell communism. He was forced to eventually go along with the Soviet Union. And Caleb,
I mean, actually, fucking hell, yeah. I mean, quite right, actually. See, this is what happens with jabronis tracking. You end up having to hand it to fucking jabronis. Because that's true. That's not... Castro was putting communist party members in jail for the first couple of years after the revolution. Then he realized that he had managed, the revolution managed to paint itself into a corner where the U.S. was seething over having lost control of Cuba, but they didn't have any ally capable of actually helping them defend themselves against the U.S. And then he started to realize, well, maybe Marxist-Leninism, I guess. I mean, he's not wrong when he says this.
We've talked about this too as well.
Yes.
So when you talk about Mao, when you talk about Stalin, the thing that kind of gets me, and Spike, please jump in, because I want to also know what your biggest beef with socialism is. But a lot of these collective countries, or countries who've gone to this collective government, it's just simply a reaction from the empire with their boot on their neck. So how can we really be criticized? How can we criticize all these other countries and all these other governments, especially the systems, when we have to clean our own house first? Go ahead, Spike.
Well, there's certain. Okay, and again, I'm having to hand it to one of these fucking jabronis. That is quite right. Like, literally, a lot of this stuff. Like, in fact, including, when you look at, like, repression in these countries, a lot of the time, the starting point is that they are dealing with a security threat that is on a level that the people in the US cannot conceive of it, because there is no entity that has as much of a power imbalance with the US as the US has with like Cuba or Venezuela or stuff. Yeah, I mean, and I think actually on a certain level the US actually kind of hopes that ends up being the reaction, that that they end up taking a more repressive course, because that will probably leave them in more conflict as well with their local working class. But yeah,
only a point to be made there. I mean, one could argue that in the same way that what we call the woke left is really just fascist imperialism wrapped in a rainbow flag.
Okay, Caleb's got his finger up something. The woke left is just fascist imperialism waving a rainbow flag. What the fuck does that even mean?
What we are now calling Chinese communism is really an increasingly authoritarian but almost Western style corporatism wrapped in a Chinese.
Yeah, because he can't say capitalism. He can't admit that a system that he doesn't like is capitalism.
Communist flag. But I would say it's correct that is a kind of reaction to Western forces or Western elements of Western policy, where the corporatists who run things in the Western world, in order to
corporatists
basically destroy their smaller competition, so poison the well with regulatory burdens and tax burdens in their home countries that they destroyed their competition, with the idea that they would go over to countries like China and like Vietnam and so forth and set up shop there, and then use the U.S. military to guard, protect their products as they're shipped back into this country, thereby basically closing off entire markets to themselves. The exchange there, the trade-off, was that China would adopt an increasingly a less communist or less socialist push for how the government is run, and more of a corporatist one.
More of a capitalist one. Like, I love the way, you see, this is okay,
which is why we see a lot of
is this the whole thing? Oh wait, this is just okay, this is just one, this isn't a whole bunch of new stuff here. This is like a greatest hits that he didn't bother editing. Like, nobody in his cult knows how to use DaVinci Resolve and just clip the highlights, or maybe they realized there's no such thing as a highlight. What's everybody think? Should we continue on with this thing? Should we move over, try something else? What do you think? I feel like this could potentially get boring. Yeah, well, they call themselves that because they want to claim to be against all of the bad things about capitalism, but they have to, but in order to do that, while at the same time, in reality, being for all of the bad things about capitalism, they have to come up with another name for it. Okay. Maybe try something else. Destiny's media company and who he wants to recruit, maybe. The jabroni stacking only works when the jabronis are actually not at cross purposes.
The new conservatives are not the same as the conservatives from 10 years ago. So you have to be very...
Actually, they are, though.
Careful about that. The values have changed significantly in very surprising ways, more than I thought they could.
What is surprising to who? Oh, okay, we can do that. Actually, it would be interesting to see how he deals with them pointing out quite correctly that that shit isn't communism.
All right, everything's working. Thank you very much, everybody.
In this case, it adjusted to allowing more business and profits. Fall through the cracks. We need to have...
No, we're already past it.
regime to Mao Zedong, and I think that's objectively
Is that a
true.
fair statement?
That it is.
Fair statement, Caleb?
They now praise wealth. They now allow people to own businesses. I mean, like, yes, it's less communist than it once was.
Can we just get?
Okay. Here we go. I mean, how is he going to deal with this? Because they are objectively right. Like, allowing a capitalist class, I mean, you can say that is equally capitalist in that the capitalist class has now expanded, that the state had previously been the sole permitted capitalist, and now private capitalists are also permitted. Well, you could say that is equally uncommunist, or you could say it is, moving farther away from communism, because it is getting rid of the principle that you shouldn't have a capitalist class, even though in reality having a state capitalist system is having a capitalist class, just a different kind of one. But how is he going to deal with this? I am kind of curious.
I agree with that. I think communism always praised wealth. If you look at Karl Marx, he was saying that, the ultimate goal is a society with so much abundance. The goal of the Communist Party is to increase wealth in society. The problem with capitalism,
yeah, I mean, he keeps on talking about praising wealth,
is that it holds back productive forces. In China, during the 1950s and 60s, they had a heavily state-run economy. In the 1970s and 80s, they adjusted to have more of a state sector. But the Soviet Union did the same thing. In the 1920s, they had the new economic policy in the Soviet Union. Then
they moved away. They moved away from communism very early on.
Stalin and the 5-year economic plans, and that socialism is always adjusting. Venezuela has a much smaller state sector than China does at this point. Venezuela, the oil is in the hands of the state, and the oil is used to subsidize, but it's largely a private economy. Nicaragua, their big success has been their micro-entrepreneurship program, where the state loans money to Nicaraguans to start their own business.
And mostly that ends up just being used to cover living expenses.
Socialism is constantly adjusting.
And by making it micro loans, that's actually even shittier than just giving people benefits, because now you're in debt.
There's a big private sector in many socialist countries. There's worker cooperatives. There's state-run industry.
All right,
okay, so he's not answering the point at all that it is not communist to have a capitalist class. He literally is not addressing the point at all.
Fine. You can say
is planning.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Listen. Let me. You can say it's always adjusting. Okay. My point is that in this case, it adjusted to allowing more business and profits. But okay, whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. And he did not address that shit at all, except to more or less admit he didn't explain why you can still, in any meaningful sense, call it communist if you're allowing all of these capitalist bourgeois things to happen. Because, of course, he hasn't got an answer
Very
for
easy
that.
to start a business in China. In many cases, much easier than it is in the United States of America. Regardless of any of that, when you define, look, again, I don't want to get just trapped into the semantic debate, but when you just define capitalism as seeking profits, that's just not anyone's accurate definition of what capital.
Well, I mean, it is one key thing about it, but it isn't the whole thing. I'd like to see capitalism is when the means of production are owned by somebody other than the working class, and are used to produce commodities for exchange value in order to generate profit.
Capitalism is even not the capitalism that I would defend. Capitalism is about private ownership of the means of production, private ownership of property. Now, there's obviously lots of different schemes within there, but for example, the vast majority of businesses either don't make a profit or make very, very little profit.
Yes, which is another, which in capitalism means they're failing. That means they're going under. Like, that what you're saying is that most businesses fail, and that's true. Most new businesses fail. It is extremely rare for a business that is not, owned by somebody who has a huge amount of money to throw at it, who's just starting out, to actually get anywhere.
There's lots of millions of nonprofit businesses and millions of businesses where basically the owners squeak out a living. They might draw a salary out of that business.
They're still doing better than the workers, though.
Really, no profits to speak of.
This is not an answer, though, because The point is, you're in capitalism, if you're not generating a profit as a capitalist, then you're failing. Then you're going under. So yeah, the fact that a lot of capitalists, especially small capital, fails, it does not contradict the
most
point.
people
It
who you
proves
know own a business,
the rule.
they're probably in that situation. There are a few big businesses that make tons of profits, and a few mid-sized businesses that make nice profits.
Yeah, because there's such a thing as capitalist
the worst of the big ones are always in bed with governments. But I just think that
capitalists are always in bed with governments, though. Who do you think makes sure that people don't just take their shit? Like, literally, you can't do that if you don't have cops, if there isn't an army to make sure that you can get access to the resources that they want, if there aren't cops to keep the workers in line and make sure everybody respects their bogus claim to ownership.
Regardless, I think it's probably more productive for us to just talk about what the system that we are, advocating for in the system.
Okay. So his answer was basically not an answer. He just pointed out that lots of ML societies.
New conservatives are not the same as the conservatives from 10 years ago. So you have to be very careful about that. The values have changed significantly in very surprising ways, more than I thought they could.
Like, which ways are surprising, though?
And I think populists are, some ways, anti-American. Like getting Nick Fuentes.
Who gives a fuck if they're anti-American? Like, what does that even mean?
Just blatantly admit that he's not very American in terms of how, it's funny because your slogan is America first, and here you're admitting to wanting to turn America into a theocracy. You acknowledge that you're...
Well, yes. That's the thing. Nationalism doesn't have to make sense. You can be, America first just means it means nothing really other than we're going to be racist.
Point of view is fundamentally anti-American. From the founding fathers, the framers, 100%. Why is populism bad? I'm not sure what it is. I thought it was okay in nature.
Yeah, well, no, it's a fake. It's that's because it's a term that is designed to ensure that people don't know what it is, because it has two purposes: one, to trivialize the threat of fascism, and the other to lump any kind of anti-capitalist, any kind of leftist perspective in with the threat of fascism. It's...
Am I dumb? My end state dream would be nice to run a publication where I'm proud of the articles that are being written, because I feel like they...
That sounds horrible. Like, I don't want to read stuff he's proud of. I've seen what he's proud of.
Accurately represent most sides of things. It feels like everybody is loaded against something.
Sides.
Who would you even have on the right? If there's a concept that I could imbue in your mind, whether you're liberal or conservative, okay? Do you think depressed people have a more accurate view of reality compared to normies?
God, what a fucking question.
There are interesting studies on depressed people being more realistic with certain estimates. I would be surprised. I would have to see those studies. One thing that I argued with this with Devin a little bit, and I wish people could understand this. I think one thing that people, let's see if I can get this into words. People sometimes make a mistake when they're evaluating things, and they think of things in terms of, this concept is not solidified in my brain yet, because I started thinking about something a couple months ago, so I don't have a good handle on this.
Wow, he only started thinking a couple of months ago. You can tell.
There'll be an effect right here. Oh, we were talking about rationality. I'm just gonna spit some random words out. This concept will be more solid in my brain probably in a couple months. But basically, people will question. People will do a thing, they'll question whether or not somebody's being rational in their behavior. They'll say, oh, is this person being rational or is this person being irrational? However, when they think of rational or irrational, what they think of is a process. But what they never consider is that people actually have different values for end states that they aren't aware of. People assume that everybody has the same end state subjective valuation going on, but that's not always the case. Because I think the example I used was homosexuality. And
wait, what?
end goals aren't valued the same. Gay people, I'm going to say that, well, if we accept gay, everybody has the same end state subjective valuation going on. That's not always the case. Because I think the example I used was homosexuality. And I think, was it Hutch? Or was it Devin that argued this relating to homosexuality? Or no, it was...
What, that homosexuality is irrational? Is that?
No, it was Rose Wrist is who I was talking this about. Rose Wrist, I think, was arguing, okay, well, if I was to debate like whether we should accept gay people, I'm going to say that.
Why should that be a fucking debate though? Like, obviously we should, like, you know, queer people exist. That's all you need to know.
If we accept gay people in society, it increases economic activity, it increases, less people are dying, it increases.
Wow, that's so wonderful. He thinks that we should accept us queer people because it's good for the economy.
How much people get along with each other. Like, it might be all these things. And the assumption is that, like, as long as we're following a rational thought process, we're all going to wind up at the same place. But the problem is that these particular end goals aren't valued the same.
Well, like, why do you need an end goal other than treating people with respect in order to treat queer people with respect? Why do you need some separate? Why does it have to do something extra? Why does it have to stimulate the economy? What if, like, treating queer people decently was really shitty for the economy? What if it made GDP line go down? I mean, because this guy is a GDP fetishist. I mean, you can just feel it. He has that superficiality that.
By different people. It's not actually just the process. There's actually a different weighting to the values at the end. The only reason I bring that up is because when people say, do depressed people have a more realistic outlook on life than non-depressed people, is it really depends on what that outlook or those end things are.
And also,
because I think that,
you don't know what depression is, you jabroni. Like, depression doesn't just mean that you have a pessimistic outlook on things. Depression is a physical thing, actually. It's not just you feel sad and you look and you don't think that things are going to go well. Probably he does. Destiny is dus. This what I your destiny think. I said dus. I said jabroni.
Depressed people might not be giving as much value or weight to some things that healthy, ordinary minds are. That would be like an assumption. Like, an ordinary, healthy mind might end up in a place where a depressed person, if they ended up, they would be really upset. But the ordinary mind is like, oh, this is fine, if that makes sense. That was a kind of a gap. When you argue that Biden is better than Trump with
fast forward without even fast forwarding him.
Conservatives, are you appealing to conservative values? If not, are those pretty hard? Well, I think Biden is better than Trump if you appeal to conservative values. But you have to be careful with the new conservatives are not the same as the conservatives from 10 years ago. So you have to be very careful about that. The values have changed significantly in very surprising ways, more than I thought they could. I'm not sure.
Changed. I mean, the reason
I don't know how
so many of these like mainstream reactionaries are cool with Trump and his shit is that all Trump is doing is acting. He's giving them cover. Because when he comes out there and just outright says some fast shit that they're all thinking, that creates space for them to be a little bit more explicit about their shit. They have not fundamentally changed.
With a populist. I have nothing in common with a populist. And I think populists are, like, in some ways, like, anti-American.
Wow, that's two completely meaningless things. It's like saying gerbils are forble. Populists are anti-American. What the fuck does anti-American mean? And what are you defining as a fucking populist?
So it's an interesting, like, getting Nick Fuentes to say, I don't want to say getting him to say, because he's kind of like secretly open about it. That just like blatantly admit that he's not very American in terms of how, like, it's funny because your slogan is like America first, and here you're admitting to wanting to turn America into a theocracy in a way.
What do you mean admitting? That isn't something he's admitting. That's not something that he's hiding. That's not in his back pocket. That's what he leads with. Like, yes, he's a U.S. nationalist who also wants to turn the place into a fascist theocracy because he's a piece of shit. Like, I don't know why that is anti-American. Like, that doesn't mean anything. And I don't even see why it's bad to be
a way that would appall any of the original Constitution drafters or founding fathers, right? That's like wild to me.
Yeah, but who gives a shit? I mean, that's your metric. What if they were cool with it? What if you thought that the founding aristocrats would have been cool with what Nick Fuentes wants for the world? you know, would that make it okay? Would you be all right with it? Would that remove your objection? In which case, like, what is your objection even if all you give a shit about is whether it is consistent with what you think a bunch of rich people who died 200 years ago would have thought?
You acknowledge that your point of view is fundamentally anti-American. From the founding fathers, the framers, the law.
100%.
Consider watching your stuff, and indeed, it seems to make a great effort to stay informed. How do you stay up to date with news? How do you prioritize what types of news to read into? Do you prioritize any countries or regions that you can do? I will say, and I've been saying this more, and it's a little bit aggressive, and it sounds kind of mean, and I don't mean to make it sound that way, but I think that a big red flag is when somebody says, I read a variety of news sources to stay informed, and that's how I like counter my bias.
Well, I mean, that's not a bad starting point, but it kind of depends what the fucking news sources are.
That's a bullshit statement. If you want to stay informed on stuff, you just have to be willing to read. There's no shortcut for it. I think it's kind of like working out.
Wait, what? So it's bullshit to say that you look at multiple sources in order to kind of counter any bias that you might be getting from one of them. That's bullshit. But just read and it'll be cool isn't? Like, it does matter what you read. It does matter, like...
out your brain. There's not like an easy thing you can do to just get muscles and get shredded. You just kind of have to do it.
Well, I mean, no, but there are things that work better than other things.
As long as you're willing to read.
And how the fuck would he know about getting ripped? He isn't jacked.
And read a decent amount, you'll be pretty informed on stuff. There's this idea that
if you read a decent amount, you will be pretty informed on stuff. Wow. This is somebody whose opinion people care about. Like, I think it's like 80, 90,000 people. How many subscribers has he got? 800,000 people care what this dickhead thinks. And his thoughts on, like, keeping informed and trying to check your biases is just read stuff. Yeah, exactly. Well, he doesn't even say multiple. Just read stuff. Read a lot of stuff. Like, it does matter what stuff you read.
There's some hardcore, like, you gotta try so hard to pick the right sources and the right news and all that. It's kind of bullshit. Like,
no, it isn't, actually. It isn't bullshit. You do actually have to engage consciously with the propaganda system, because because the propaganda system will not do that for you. Like, everybody is going to, like, all news outlets are going to tell you you can rely on them, whether that's true or not. And of course, whether and to what extent you can rely on them will be different from case to case a lot of the time. They might be good on one thing. They might be good on telling you what the weather's likely to be tomorrow, but not necessarily on what's going on in Palestine, for example. Like, this is, I mean, wow, this guy does not know shit.
You've seen us on stream. We've read like a variety of news sources about a variety of events. They more or less report things. That's why when Andrew Tate was like, look at how...
it depends. Yeah, sometimes it depends what sources. Like, sometimes they will actually give you completely different accounts of things. And it matters which ones you choose. If you look at the fucking Times of Israel versus Electronic Intifada on the same event, you will get very different coverage. And different rates of factual accuracy as well. Like, the Times of Israel is a great place to go for just outright fabrication a lot of the time.
Different. Everybody reports something. No, not really. They generally report like about the same. There's going to be differences when it comes to countries reporting things relating to their country. So, like when Turkey shot down those jets from Russia, it was because Russia, is saying that Turkey's just doing it for no reason, and they were going in to bomb ISIS, and Turkey was saying, well, actually, you guys are bombing the good guys, and you're over our territory, so fuck you. And the U.S. is kind of siding with Turkey, like, for stuff like...
Except Turkey is, like, supporting ISIS. NATO is supporting ISIS.
Like that, it might be a little bit different, but for the most part, the reports are journalistic.
Yeah, who cares? I mean, you read the Daily Storm, or you read the fucking Independent or the Guardian. Just read a lot. Who gives a shit? Like, God, this guy is so lazy. He is so completely averse to the idea of making any kind of intellectual effort.
Hold on. Why is populism bad? I'm not sure what it is. I thought it was okay in nature. Am I dumb?
He thought populism was okay in nature? What does he think populism is?
In my mind, populism is basically it's a revolt against institutions because you're unhappy with the current state of affairs, but you don't have any real solutions for how to fix them.
Well, except that the people that he's talking about, like in this like vague, deliberately vague concept of populism, all of them would say that they do have solutions. All of them would point to very specific things they want to do that would make whatever they think the problem is go away, at least according to them. Like, this is...
So you just rally behind like a strong leader who says he's going to fix everything but doesn't give you any realistic paths forward.
That isn't... But, I mean, now you're just, like, talking about fascism.
Destiny, if I want to stay informed but I don't have the time to read, well, that's where a good media company would come in. I'm not sure.
No, that isn't where a good media company would come in. Like, literally, this is exactly the problem in capitalism. This is a big part of why the propaganda system works as well as it does. Because if you want to actually be tolerably well informed on anything, it requires actually very detailed engagement with sources, and with the sources that they cite to the extent that they do, and with other accounts of the same stuff. And the thing is, in capitalism, people are coming home from their second and third jobs, waiting to go do their fucking side hustle, and they are tired as shit. They haven't even got enough energy to make fucking dinner properly, let alone carry out an individual research project. So he's gonna start telling us about his fucking media company.
Sure, that's what this is. I think like my end state dream in 5 or 10 years, I don't know. My end state dream would be, it would be nice to run a publication where I'm proud of the articles that are being written because I feel like they accurately represent most sides of things, but like an article can be read in 5 minutes. Like that like does a good job at trying to get a fair message across. That I don't know of any publications right now that exist like that. It feels like everybody is loaded against something. But
yeah, wow, it's so weird how like people have opinions.
Yeah, I don't know. I also wouldn't trust any news site that calls itself nonpartisan or unbiased because those are usually the most biased and most partisan. So I don't know.
Oh wait, he just got done saying that it doesn't matter what you read. You shouldn't worry about that it is bullshit to try reading multiple sources in order to try to counteract the bias in any one. And then he goes off and says, yeah, actually those sources that say they're like non-biased and unpartisan are usually the ones the most full of shit. Like, make up your fucking mind. Try to maintain a consistent worldview for like more than 5 minutes.
Are you saying that somebody reads 20 articles a week from CNN or just informed as someone reading 20 articles a week at Fox? Not the same. I'm saying that either of those people will be more informed than the person who only reads Twitter headlines. Yeah.
Except not really. Because that depends entirely if what they're reading is accurate. It's not enough, like, yes, they will be informed on what Fox and CNN are claiming happened. That does not mean that they are actually informed on the things they read about. They're just informed about the content of the things they read. That's not being informed, that's reading comprehension.
Yes. Can't you have pro...
Oh, I see, we've got a spammer. And I personally love it when spammers come in with this angle where they say they're going to help you out with fucking... Oh, shit. Where are my moderation tools? Settings. Oh, there we go. Moderation. Ban shutters. Look. Moderator tools in chat. It's supposedly already there. But I don't see it. Ah, fuck. Now he's just... Okay. There we go. Blocking him. Sorry about that. It isn't set up the same way.
Institutional populism? I don't think so. I think populism and institutionalism are kind of opposed to each other. No? Is it necessarily? I feel like
Wait, I missed something. I was dealing with these... I love these link spammers whose whole hook is that they're going to help you grow your stream or something like that. Except the only way they know how to advertise is by spamming other people's
those
chat.
people will be more informed than the person who only reads Twitter headlines. Yes. Can't you have pro-institutional populism? I don't think so. I think populism and institutionalism are kind of opposed to each other. No?
No. I mean, again, populism is an amorphous concept. Like, and lots of it is used. I mean, there was a party called the Populist Party in the U.S. in the late 19th century, and you couldn't really call them anti-institution. They were critical of the existing institutions, certainly, but that doesn't make them like against institutions as a whole. Like, what? None of this makes any fucking sense.
Is it necessarily? I feel like populism is the idea that like the public needs to rise up because like we're not being represented by the elites, and I feel
no, that's also meaningless. Usually populism is kind of the opposite. It is people from above who are trying to stave off that sort of a development by trying to offer some segment of the public what they want or some version of it.
I feel like the institutions are more often the representation of the elite than like the public is like the feeling.
Well, I mean, that isn't populism. Yeah, again, populism doesn't really mean anything unless you mean the ideology of the Populist Party from the late 19th century in the U.S. But... yeah, exactly.
Where would you say you are biased? Well, my biases are
how much time you got?
they're going to be related to things that are personal to me. If I have biases, they're going to be things that are personal to me, which can be good or can be bad. But
well, like, for example, it's personal to him that he wants Israel to commit genocide, and so he's biased against acknowledging
the biggest advantage I have is that I don't have any political or social allegiance because I can...
Oh, God. Does he believe that? Is his denial that deep?
Be alone all the time, and I don't care if I have friends or not in any particular group, so I'm isolated from that. And then I have I'm not like politically allegiant to a particular thing. If like Biden comes out as a hardcore protectionist or some bullshit, or like Bernie Sanders would win against Nikki Haley, I might like support conservatives more maybe. I don't have like any big political...
Well, that sounds like you do actually have some very specific political allegiances. They just happen to be very much connected with the status quo, so you're less aware of them.
Allegiances. There are pros and cons to it, but at this point in my career, I'm big enough that most of the cons have kind of subsided, although there's still big things to deal with. But I can still have personal biases.
No, your con has not subsided. You're running a long con. We got to give him that.
Right, so maybe I'm more inclined to believe a certain thing because of a personal experience I have. Maybe I'm more inclined to fight against a certain thing because certain people represent that I don't like personally. So those are things that I would have to be aware of. But I don't have like all the same social cohesive problems that other people do because I don't give a fuck.
Hey, this is so silly. I mean, he actually thinks that because he has bought in wholesale to like late capitalist neoliberal ideology, which just happens to be the dominant ideology, that means he doesn't have an ideology. Like, he's actually he's actually managed to convince himself of this.
SXE Phil already covering the news in short form with a kind of middle ground take. Who is SXE Phil? I don't know who that is. Don't you mention the CHIPS Act in support of Biden and infrastructure bill? Aren't those hardcore protectionists? I think you can probably make decent... SXE Phil is Philip DeFranco? What does SXE mean?
Like, I mean, if he's against protectionism, for example, I mean, then that is an argument in favor of neoliberalism. Although, actually, when he says he's against protectionism, what he mostly probably means is that he's in favor of what is called free trade, which is in fact protectionism, because what it does is ban a model of development that is literally the model of development that has worked for all of the leading dynamic economies in the world today. Like, it is literally pulling the rug out from under the global south, saying, yeah, we used state subsidies and protectionism to get ourselves to where we are now, but you're not allowed to, because then you'd compete with us. But they call it free trade, and they say it's opposed to protectionism, and so therefore dills like this guy, they think that they're against protectionism. Well, because they're white dudes who know how to give the authoritative voice. He has the voice that we've been told to defer to. And that's it. That's his whole thing. He doesn't know anything.
I think you can probably make decent national security arguments in relation to the manufacturing of certain things. Sexy Phil? Was that his first name, or?
Sup, you beautiful bastards!
So okay. I haven't watched a lot of Straight Edge. Oh shit, I remember that Straight Edge. I remember just from the Philip DeFranco I've seen. Okay, so Philip DeFranco does a decent job at being nonpartisan. It seems like he gives both sides of the story.
What the fuck does nonpartisan mean? Like, that means that you have no bias? That just means you share the bias of the ruling class as a whole.
But it would also be nice to give an opinion too. Like, ideally, this is the ideal. Okay. Well, if you're just doing reporting, it would be reporting. Ideally, I want a news.
He's such a skilled media critic and stuff. He doesn't understand that there is necessarily opinion and perspective that flows into just dry factual reporting.
Website where an opinion is given, but all sides have been fairly considered. That would be my
What are all
ideal.
sides, though? Which sides are you going to continue? Are you considering there? Like, let's say it's something to do with, I don't know, Holocaust Memorial Day or something like that. Does all sides mean you're going to listen to Holocaust deniers? Their side? Is it just all what the fuck does that mean?
Right? So, for instance, let's say that we were writing stories about, let's say that we were going to write a story about the Israeli-Palestinian peace process.
Like, that's such a retro bullshit line there. You haven't heard about the peace process since he was probably about 5 years old, because that lie just fell apart after Oslo, and there's been no lie that works as an overarching bullshit narrative to replace it.
Right? There would be 4 different ways that I see this covered. A left-leaning source.
Wait, 4 different ways? Really?
A left-leaning source might say, oh, well, in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, Israelis have constantly been backstabbing Palestinians. They have never stopped encroaching on Palestinian land, and they've always negotiated from huge positions of power while cutting out Palestinian delegates to negotiate peace.
I mean, so they would point out facts. I mean, literally nothing he said there is even editorializing. It is literally just the facts of what the so-called peace process has always been.
Okay, that might be a really left-leaning take on it.
No, it isn't. There are plenty of people, plenty of sources who are not leftists who will point all this shit out because it's simply the facts. Just a dry historical narrative will discuss the fact that as the so-called peace process is dragging on, Israel's role has been first refusing to acknowledge any Palestinian interlocutor, then imposing all sorts of conditions on allowing a Palestinian to even be allowed at the table, and at the same time has constantly been taking over more illegally occupied land in the West Bank and Gaza, mostly in the West Bank. Like, those are just fucking facts. That's not bias. That's not
a really
narrative.
right-leaning take on it might be, Palestinians have always been bad partners for peace. The origination.
That's a lie, though. Literally, first of all, what is a bad partner for peace? Like, what does that mean? But, if it's supposed to mean Palestinians have not been the ones who refuse to come to the table, it's just false. It's like, that's not a perspective. That's just a lie. The Palestinians have been the ones who have constantly been coming to the table and trying to get Israel to come to the table, but Israel doesn't have to come to the table because the U.S. ensures that they have this qualitative military edge.
Of the Palestinian movement has been one of violence. That's never changed, and all of their leaders have spoken constantly about overthrowing all of Israel, and the international support seems to say as much.
Yeah, all of which is just, that's just, literally, those aren't perspectives. You have the so-called left-leaning version is just facts, and then the right-leaning version is just lying. And yeah, you could point out that the people on the left are more likely to be the ones to acknowledge the well-established and well-documented facts. But, that doesn't make it two perspectives. It's just one is bullshit. Yeah, and mostly they argue with people who are even more ignorant than they are. And their audience is made up of people who are more ignorant than they are.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a right-leaning take. Then you might be able to get like a Philip DeFranco take, where Philip DeFranco would say, for Israel-Palestine, both sides have had issues with trying to be partners for peace.
Which, again, no. Yeah, so we are not talking then. Philip DeFranco sounds like somebody actually I should be looking at the JabroniCon. I'd forgotten about that guy. Now I'm remembering. He did some really, really, really shitty stuff on what is it, Shen Yun and the Falun Gong cult. Just complete both sides nonsense where he doesn't take any position. Like, literally, he does not seem to keep in mind, doesn't seem to have firmly in mind that there are facts.
The left or the Palestinians seem to constantly be using terrorism and other forms of militant violence to encourage change, and the Israelis on the right seem to always respond with that militant.
Well, not just on the right, though.
Violence by doing their own things, like massive expansion, territorial expansion of the West Bank.
Yeah, and this is again, that's just chronologically inaccurate. It's been the other way around the whole time. The whole reason there is armed resistance from Palestinians is because Zionists keep taking their shit. And they don't want to have their shit taken, so they fight back. Like, chronologically, this is just nonsense. This is what he thinks. This is a guy who thinks that 800,000 people think that this guy has takes that are worth listening to. And this guy is really convinced. He's terribly impressed with his grip on how to understand, like, media bias. Like, literally, only one side on here can be said to be even tolerably, as he sketched them out, can be said to be even tolerably consistent with the documented factual record. And all the rest of it is just fucking farts.
Right? I feel like the best news source would be one that would give, like, a take that would be similar to this, but then, like, offer a recommendation.
So not facts, just bullshit, just fucking waffle? That's what you think a good news source would be. Just fucking waffle. Why not just use facts? What about facts? Do you not like facts? I like facts, personally. God, this guy. 800,000 subs. And this is his take on, like, media bias or something? Anyway, I just noticed the time. It is time for me to start wrapping up. Glad to see you all here. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I look forward to seeing you on Friday and in the Discord. And if you have ideas for videos for me to check out, do point them out in the Discord and make sure that I actually see them, because I'm actually really bad at checking different platforms and shit. Meanwhile, I should tell you, if you go to my Patreon, link at the top of the screen, you will find that I have now translated 32 of the 36 extant essays and speeches by Kollontai contemporary and Bolshevik women's section leader, the first one, Inessa Armand. They are all up there, the draft translations. If you click on the collection Inessa Armand, you will find them. Yeah. And Palestinians rely on, first of all, what is terrorism? And second of all, like, how did the Zionists actually, what did they do again? I mean, I seem to remember them bombing a lot of hotels, actually. Okay, God, I need to, like, wash my brain out after seeing this nonsense. Have a good night, have a good rest of your weekend, and fuck Destiny, and free Palestine.